right, like Jaden said, my name is Sue Balcom. I live north of Mandan, where it was a lot warmer this morning than it was here. And so I borrowed a really nice shirt from these guys so it looks like I work here. So, because as I came out of retirement, just for you guys, because I used to do a lot of this, and then my husband's like, you got to retire. But one of the things that he didn't take into account for is that I've been waiting 20 years to quit my job so I can go full-time farming. To me, that's what retirement is all about. So I didn't start out to be a market gardener. I'm going to run through some information based on the questions that I get when I'm at a farmer's market. A little bit about what I know, a little bit of research that you can do on your own. I brought some book titles you guys can take a peek at. But the big question is, so you want to be a farmer, right? There is this fantasy world out there that I just make fun of all the time when I write newspaper columns or speak to people about what a farmhouse looks like. Everybody has farmhouse decor. Farming has become really romanticized lately. I did not actually grow up and work on a farm, but all of my relatives are farmers. I'm from McIntosh County, and my dad decided he didn't want to farm, so he went to town and drove a deep rock truck in Fredonia. So we were out on the Harold Whitmire farm a lot, playing with the bulls, picking joke cherries, eating really good local foods. And that is really my only qualification for any of the work that I did after I became a local foods marketing specialist for the ag department, the executive director of farms, and now running my own farm, is that I grew up in a local economy. And I believe that North Dakota has the potential to become a vegetable production state. If they can do it in Canada, we can do it here. We have everything that we need. So I've been out encouraging people for a long time to start small diversified farming operations. But this is kind of what a farmhouse looks like, everything is kind of cute and in order. And then this is the reality of it. This is my front porch and my greenhouse there, and that's what my pots look like. I'm so preoccupied with all the cucumbers and tomatoes and stuff that I've got going on right now that I didn't dress for the weather today, and I kept trying to tell Siri that this was north, and she kept telling me this was south on the way out here. I had to call Jaden and clarify that, so I didn't want to be late. So from now on, I'll listen to Siri, I think. So this is another farm fantasy. You see gardens on television programs and in movies and stuff, and everything is like super cool and lined up and there ain't a weed in sight. And this is somebody's high tunnel, and apparently they're doing a really good job of it, because this is really the reality of my life right now. This is what my high tunnel looks like, and I love this high tunnel. And one of these days I'm going to design a robe for people like myself and my friends who go outside all the time in the morning without getting dressed. Then you bring it in the house and then you're like, wah! So this is my life right now. I'm doing 2 farmer markets a week, one on Thursday and one on Saturdays, and I do a lot of baking. I'm at a crux right now in my career. I just don't know whether I want to grow things and can them or whether I want to bake, because I'd rather be growing. It's getting difficult to do both. And from a health standpoint, it's not the best thing in the world to go from the garden into the kitchen without properly washing your hands and your feet and keeping your buckets and all that kind of stuff clean. So this is our farm, the Root Cellars. My husband is only farming by osmosis because he wasn't, this wasn't something that he wanted to do. And then when we got married in about 2007, and I moved north of town out to where he was living, and I saw the water, the land, the trees, and nobody else around. All I could think about was farm. So I had to fight with him a little bit, but I think he kind of likes it. So these are the things we will be talking briefly about today: is what a market garden is, what kind of research, some requirements, some planning, some harvesting, and some selling. There is not a market that I don't attend that somebody doesn't come up to me and say, I want to be part of this market. And my first question to them is, are you growing vegetables? Because we don't need 40 bakers or candy makers or popcorn ball makers. We need vegetables. In the morning at 7:30, when we arrive to set up on a Saturday, there are people in the parking lot waiting for us. Then they get in line and they're waiting for the vegetables. They're seriously buying the vegetables, and then about 10:30ish, the other people show up for the bread and the pies and the canned goods and things like that. So there is a huge demand for vegetables. Plus then there's the value added product part of that. You know, like I make the world's best salsa, and I will stand by that, because I have people in January, they're like, put me on the list for salsa. And I'm like, okay, super cool. What if I don't get tomatoes? Because as you know, the year you want to grow all the pickling cucumbers, the onions are growing really well, and the squash are growing really well, and the cucumbers are piddling out over here. So you can't, I don't like to control things as much as my husband. He's like, you're not doing this right. I'm like, I am doing this right, but you know, Mother Nature has a say in how this all works too. So you have to be like really flexible. So what is a market garden? Market gardens are small. You can make a living off of probably 2 to 3 acres. You can make a really good living if you're Roberta, because she's got way more garden space than I do. But she is our most reliable producer, Roberta Thorson. And so she's there 4 days a week, and I just don't understand how she can do it. I can't hardly do 2 a week. So once you get to be that size, you need to really think about what you're doing here. Diverse. You can be really diverse in your cropping system. I have 2 high tunnels, 4 raised beds, and an outdoor garden that the turkeys just discovered, mainly because I planted a buckwheat cover crop. And they've never been in that garden before. And what we did was we harrowed it up. We have a small Grillo tractor. And my husband was kind enough to dig it out of the garage, and he harrowed this area up, and I broadcast all this buckwheat seed, and all of a sudden the turkeys are scratching around in there. And the stuff they didn't get, you know, in a week's time is like 6 inches tall already, but they've got that one area there. And then when I go to shoo them out, they just stand there and look at me. So I'll have to think of something to do to keep them out of there. Yes, there's a lot of manual labor in an operation my size. We don't have great big tractors or things that lay down raised beds with mulch on like some of the larger operations do. Those people, like the Forger Farm people, they have tractors they can plant with and all that kind of stuff because they have a lot more space than I do. However, the year of COVID, I was still working at the church, and I earned probably 1/3 of my annual income that year off my small operation. So it is possible, but you gotta wanna work. I'm German, by the way, so if that helps explain this. So there is this, I've done a lot of farm beginning classes and things like that when I was at farms. I met a lot of Canadian, they have a lot of small farms up in Canada. There's this one, I cannot pronounce these people's names, but this guy, Jean Martin Fortier, actually wrote this book called The Market Gardener, and he has really good information there. He breaks down the most profitable crops you can grow, how much you can make off of an area. So this is a great book you can recommend to people there. But this gardening, one of the gardening operations, it was Les Jardins de la Grillanetti, something like that, have been in business at least since 2013, because their gross revenue was $140,000 on one 3-acre garden land. And so they figured that their profit was like at 45%. So in North Dakota, everybody says, well, you can't grow vegetables here because it's too cold. Well, that's not necessarily true. They do it in Canada. There are certain areas in North Dakota that have microclimates that are warmer and less windy. We live down on the river bottom, not next to the river, except the year it flooded, then we were in the river. But in the meantime, we are probably a mile from the main channel, but we have wonderful sandy soil. So our potatoes are like this big. Sorry. Had to throw that in there.
Not like Jaden.
Not like Jaden's, but people come to the market, they want peas and baby potatoes. They can cream them and eat them together. So one of the things, there is a million Facebook pages out there for people who have high tunnels and people who have small market gardens and large market gardens. And oh my gosh, you guys, when the questions pop up about, is this a weed or what? And the guy's holding a pepper plant in his hand, I'm thinking to myself, you're definitely not supposed to be farming. And if you are getting into farming, like I grew up around this stuff. I don't understand how far away from the ground people have become. You know, like my kids will eat a carrot out of the ground, their friends will not. You know, because they've eaten processed foods probably their whole entire lives. So I would totally recommend, there's so many good programs in this state. Keith is going to be talking here later on. Keith and I worked together. He was on the board at Farms. He does a farm business management program out of Botno. I think he turned it over to somebody else that will help with the financial end of it. There's a Farm Beginnings program that Farms in Tuttle runs every year that runs you through the whole thing, from what do you want to plant to how do you name your business, how do you record things so that you can file your taxes. Yes, I file my taxes. I'm an actual farm. I have a federal farm ID number, and I keep track of how much I make, and I keep track of all my expenses, mileage, all that kind of stuff. Some people do not do that. It's a personal preference. When I was a single mom and I was doing art shows, I've been on the street for most of my life selling things. That's kind of how I've been making my living. And so I would have to look for income because I didn't want them thinking I was dealing drugs on the side to support my family. So I always report all my income. Let's see, Tara and Joss Dukart have a holistic management training course that is most excellent, because part of doing farm to market is the lifestyle. You know, like I don't care that I work from sun up till sundown and I'm exhausted at the end of the day. I feel good about what I do. And somebody said the other day at the market when I said, "God, I have to figure out an exit plan so I know how to get out of what I'm doing, because I don't want to waste all that time and energy we put into building up our farm." And they're like, "Well, you're doing a public service." And I'm like, as long as you pay me for it, I'll continue to do a public service. And that's a whole nother thing. We might get into that later. But there's lots of research that you can do online too. There's all kinds of videos and information. So rather than just run out there and buy a farm and think you're going to be a farmer, you really need to encourage people to learn a little bit. There's an intern program with farms. People can intern first. That's how Jonathan Moser and his wife got started. They actually interned over in Australia, and I've known Jonathan and worked with him for a really, really long time. So what do you need to be a farm to market wonderful kind of person? And that is land. If you don't own land, you could probably rent land. There are community gardens if you just want to try gardening to see if you like it. I'm just kind of a little bit, I'm a little bit bothered by the fact that this has become something that's quote unquote popular or trending, because it's made my input costs go up exponentially. As in last year or the year before, we couldn't find jars. I had to call my daughter down in South Dakota and ask her to go to Walmart to find wide mouth bands and lids for the jars that I'm recycling. The cost of seeds has gone up incredibly high. Like you can get, 25 squash seeds cost you $3.95. I count those seeds because I want to make sure that I'm getting my 25 seeds in a packet anymore. Which, of course, now that I've kind of like pinpointed a few profitable crops, I actually buy seed by the pound or quarter pound or whatever. That way is more cost effective for sure. But I do like to experiment a little bit with growing. That's why it'd be fun out here. I could experiment all I want. So there's a lot of manual labor involved. Like when I first got started, I had to convince my husband to build me 4 raised beds. Now, I've been reading about gardening and gardening my entire life. And to me, a raised bed is on the ground, but it's raised up off the ground and you never walk on it. I hate when people walk on my gardens. You're compacting the soil. So he did build me 4 beds, and with that I just used a broad fork or spading fork and did all the digging by hand. And then we got a 16 by 24 foot tunnel. I love that high tunnel, but it has one major problem, and that was not nearly big enough. And the only reason we got that tunnel was because after the land flooded that we were on, all the trees are dying. So we lost so many trees, I thought, well, let's just start filling it in with gardens. And so by that time, he couldn't say no to me because, as you know, I'm kind of a pushy person. So I did all this handwork, and one day I said, you know, we got this extra large high tunnel and an extra large outdoor garden. So we bought this little Grillo tractor. It's a walk behind. It has balers, it has harrows, it has tillers, it has side tillers, it has bed shapers, it has everything you need. And we got the harrow because I'm not real fond of the compaction that happens when you use a tiller, but it is a beast. Like, my husband is not like a huge guy, and we had Kevin Martin from Lori Martin's farm come out with his, and I'm looking at this thinking, this is super cool, it looks really easy, but you know, Kevin's about, you know, as tall as Daryl, and so he had an easier time managing this tractor than my husband did. But he's a good sport. You know, he's getting old, so I'm learning how to do this stuff. Like, I can actually back up my trailer now and hitch it to the car and all that kind of good stuff, which is something every father should teach their daughter, by the way, how to back up a trailer. So water, people don't think about water. And the only way we could do what we do and make the profit that we do on our land is the fact that the Chuck Mork, who farms just all the area, I guess, around us, he's retired now and has rented his land out to the Price family. But one day we came home from work and he's got bobcats and great big huge pieces of equipment digging a channel right next to our property in the sand that's out there, the sandbar that was out there that formed after the river diverted over to the Bismarck side. And we're just like flabbergasted. We're like, you're digging this great big ditch. It's right on the edge of our property. What do you think you're doing? Well, I'm very grateful to him for doing that now, because that's how we irrigate. The canal is locked in right now because the river is so low, but it will always be from the sand up as high as the river level is. There's carp in there, so you know, fish poop in the water, that makes the water fertile. It also is warm when I water. We do a lot of drip irrigation, but I do have overhead sprinklers in the outside garden, but the water is warm when it comes out of there, and it's just perfect situation. I have talked to people who are using city water to water their land, and it's like $600 or $700 a month in the water bills. I could never do what I do. So water is as critical as the land that you acquire when you're going to start doing this. Where do you source your seeds? I always look for safe seed pledge companies when I buy my seed, because I believe that seeds should be free for people to be able to save. You got to buy them first, but then you can save them. But Prairie Road Organics down in Fullerton is a place I buy a lot of seeds, because there's our bread for the Northern Plains, which is where we live. So I buy a lot of organic seed, and I'm registered as an organic grower with Johnny's. So the first year that COVID hit and everybody was going to garden, you couldn't buy anything anywhere. As a commercial grower, Johnny's fills commercial orders first. So I buy a lot of inputs from them. They're pretty good people to work with. So you have to do some planning. You know, here's where the holistic management class comes in handy. How much do I need to earn to support my lifestyle? And that is an excellent class so that you can prioritize your life and not have to kind of get caught up in the machine of making money all the time. I worked until I didn't need insurance anymore, because as you get older, insurance gets more expensive, and I was fortunate enough to work at a church that was very gracious for me to come and go as I please, kind of as long as I got my work done. So I worked until I could get Medicare. I don't know. I'm not big on those kinds of things, but my husband's like, yeah, this is what you need to do. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I don't worry about it anymore. I guess I try to stay as healthy as I can. I believe gardening is part of that. So you need to know whether, like, don't quit your day job without checking this out very carefully. Then you've got to know what you're going to plant, where you're going to plant it. Now, I have to laugh because one of the good things about North Dakota that works as a bad thing about North Dakota is the fact that everybody in this state at one time or another has had a garden, or has a mom that has a garden, or has a grandmother that had a garden, and they've all eaten home canned foods, the people who've lived here most of their lives. So when you go to our market, you got these people standing in line. I grow tomatoes that look like this. This is a purple paste tomato. I have no idea what this is, but I was so proud of it, I thought I'd bring it. So that's what, oh, and here's one that my granddaughter, who I'm training to work at the farmer's market, she's doing a most excellent job. This one, she said, looks like a flower. Isn't that just the prettiest tomato you've ever seen? And then this is my all-time favorite. This is called a black crim. It's a German tomato. I gave my brother some plants one year. I grow a lot of transplants in my recycled houseboat greenhouse. And I gave him this plant and I said, grow these tomatoes. They're the best tasting tomatoes you will eat. And so in November or Christmas time, when I went back down to Jamestown to see him, I'm like, how did you like those tomatoes? And he's like, I had to throw them all away because they never got ripe. And I'm like, you did what? You threw those tomatoes away? And I finally got him to taste it. So now he's all about purple tomatoes. But the people that come to the market in this state, the older people that want a can or they want a pickle and they want to buy things by the bushel, they all want tomatoes that look like this, and they all have to be the same size. So part of what we're doing here is I'm trying to standardize the crops that I'm growing to fit the clients at the market. But with the people talking about heirlooms, I have certain people that are coming just for my tomatoes, just for the taste. So that's part of how you decide, you know, what you're going to sell at your market and what you're going to plant. You have to kind of know your consumer. And I always tell people that we're really out there really doing more education than anything else. So a lot of times people garden, they're familiar with what you're selling, but then they also have a lot of advice to give you too, like there's not enough dill in that jar of pickles there. And then the next person will come along and they're going, there's too much dill in the bottom of those pickles. I'm like, okay, I can't be your grandmother, all right? You're just gonna have to trust me on this one. So we must cultivate our own gardens because, as you know, when man was put in the Garden of Eden, he was put there to work. So when people have been going through this transition, you know, like my husband actually threw me a surprise retirement party because he didn't think I was retired enough. I'm sure that's why he did it. He wanted me to take the hint. So all these people got up and they're saying all these great things about me. And my son gets up and he says, I'm so glad my mom finally quit her job so now she can go to work. And I'm like, that's exactly how I feel about it. The word retirement is not in my vocabulary. I plan on doing this until I absolutely can't anymore. So you got your land, you got your water, you planted your seed, you're weeding, I hope. You're weeding. I love to weed, so, and I think my plants appreciate it too. You know, you weed them and then overnight they're like twice the size in the morning. So let's talk a little bit about harvesting. So you've got to know your vegetables. You got to know something about your vegetables. Like I said, I grew up in a garden. And a lot of these kids that are online, I just can't even imagine why they would even consider going into farming if they can't tell the difference between a weed and a vegetable, you know. So you also have to know, like, when is a good time to pick your tomatoes. We all know, maybe you don't know, this is zucchini season. So, oh shoot, I forgot to lock my car. I hope it doesn't have a trunk full of zucchini when I leave. Because as you know, with cucumbers and zucchini, I'm out there, it's 8 o'clock at night, I'm thinking to myself, oh, those are great pickling sized cucumbers. Oh, I'll wait till morning, right? So by the next morning, they're like this big, you know. So you have to kind of like be right on top of things, and that's where I'm at this time of year. Like, I love it. You plant it, you water it. I can spend leisurely days weeding. Right now I'm running like a, well, like you saw me, crazy person, trying to get everything harvested, get it either prepared for market or into jars as value-added products for the market. So you have to know when to pick. You have to have some equipment. One of the things that you need are good containers, good sturdy containers to harvest with. And if you're using those in your garden and you're setting them on the ground, you need to make sure that those are not the same ones that you bring into your kitchen. Keith and I taught farm food safety classes when I was at farms. I've probably been through that class 50 times if I was through it once. And there are protocols that you should know about, because my biggest concern, like, people think I'm either an extension agent or a dietitian because I'm constantly talking about the things you need to do to be safe. It's very important, because if we have one incident in this entire state that somebody gets sick from something that's canned or otherwise, we're going to end up hurting everybody. You know, people are going to start not to trust us. And that's a thing that you see a lot of loyalty at a farmer's market. People trust that what I do is going to be as clean as possible. Another thing that I do, I really like to only can and process the things that I grow myself. So I am a very seasonal seller. If I'm out of choke cherries, there's no more choke cherry jelly. If I'm out of tomatoes, there's no more of my famous salsa. And so right now, I have this same guy coming back to get watermelon pickles 2 weeks in a row. And I'm like, I don't have any more left, and I couldn't get watermelon a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do. So I spent yesterday processing a couple watermelons. That's the only thing I will buy at the store and put in a jar. So I actually sell it for less than what I sell the things that I grow for. So once my pickles are gone, that's all she wrote, baby. And my cucumbers are starting to slow down now. But I'm kind of helping them as I step across the path, you know. Stop growing, okay? I'm tired. So then you've got holding. My friend Diane Schmidt, she was out here last year. She talked about making sauerkraut. She's the most amazing person, because she shares everything she knows about gardening, market gardening, and farmers markets. She's the reason I got into doing farmers markets. She encouraged me to give it a try. Now I've moved I wrote a book called Eviger-Satz, which is everlasting yeast. And it was about how the Germans from Russia, who homesteaded the area that I grew up in, actually gardened, preserved meat, all of the things that you need to know to survive without electricity. And it was great, because I would get these recipes and I interviewed these ladies, and every single one of them talked about everlasting yeast. So when I got that recipe, I started baking sourdough bread, because that's basically what that was. And so I'm first out on the street with sourdough bread, and it's selling really, really well. And then as we built the second high tunnel, I'm thinking I really would like to quit baking so much and do more cucumbers and tomatoes and green beans. JC picked 25 pounds of green beans out of the tunnel on Monday, and I'm sure we're going to have to pick again either today or tomorrow, because they're growing like crazy. But one of the keys to doing the farmer's market is you have to be able to get that stuff to the market in a timely manner. So she taught me how to hold cucumbers for a day or two. I have a rule at my house. If I don't get them in the jar within 2 hours of picking them, then I won't pickle them. But she's telling me that there's a way to keep them for 24 or 36 hours before you get to market, so people get the freshest vegetables on the planet. And so you need to know about holding, and your garage isn't going to work. It's hot and steamy in there. Just by default, I have 3 freezers and 3 refrigerators in my house. So one of our refrigerators we turn down, it doesn't have a freezer on the top. We turn it down or turn it up, I guess it depends on how you look at it, to about 40 degrees and use it for holding, because that's kind of cooler temperature. 40, right around there. So you have to know what you're doing there. Also, some people wash their vegetables before they take them to market. I prefer not to do that. Because I grow in a tunnel, I don't have rainwater splashing dirt up. I do a lot of mulching because we have a field that we grow grass in that we harvest for mulching. So I have fairly clean vegetables most of the time. But I don't like the water. The water is one of the things that spreads contaminants, and it also starts degrading your vegetables. And so when do we pick? We pick when it's cold or cool in the mornings, or we pick at night when it's cold or cool at night. I've been known to be outside at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's fairly dark out there now, so I have to be careful about cutting flowers because I cut my finger the other day. But if you saw my arms, you'd see that they're all cut up and beat up and that kind of thing from sticking my head in the oven. So, and I'm not suicidal. I do that for a reason. So once you do this, you have to decide, you know, you've got everything you need. You've got all these beautiful vegetables or bread or whatever it is you're doing. So what are you going to do? How are you going to sell it? You've got several options. First of all, are you going to create a business for yourself? Are you going to get a permit from the state or register your name with the state? I think with most of what we're doing, we're covered under the cottage food law, which means that as long as I'm directly selling to you and you're handing me that money, then we are in agreement that I am doing this in my home kitchen and I'm not being inspected. And you should have that as a label, but we use kind of a big sign. We're an umbrella there. Now, I am part of the Bismarck Farmers Market. We have an insurance policy that covers $2 million in liability for all of our vendors, which is why we charge a fee to belong to the market. Now, if you're acting on your own, you really should. After we built the second tunnel, I went in and talked to an insurance guy and told my husband, I said, I think we should consider farm insurance here instead of just a regular policy on his house, which I found out he hadn't insured any of his outbuildings or anything like that. So thank God for me, right? So is not as motivated as I am, you know, a little more laid back, I guess. So you need to check into what any kind of licenses, permits, a membership in the market, and insurance. That's really important that you play by the rules. Like I said before, if something ever happens, it's going to really set us back. And we've been working really, really hard to build up these businesses. There's way more farmers markets in the state now than there used to be. So how are you going to market yourself? You're going to use business cards, website. I contact most people through Facebook. I put out what I'm baking during the week. I put out what I'm canning, what I'm harvesting, whether I'm going to have pies or not. I get a lot of pre-orders. And that is beautiful because we are so busy at the market that I almost can't do it by myself anymore, which is why I have my 11-year-old granddaughter helping, and she is the bomb. I wish I'd have been that together when I was 11 years old. So I'm kind of hoping that she gets into a little bit more into the gardening side of it, because then I've got a farmer in the making, which is something when you look at the age of most of the farmers in the state, we really need to start thinking about encouraging young people to get into farming, because I ain't gonna last forever, although I do look pretty good for 95, don't I? So let's see, what else have we got here? All right, so we're gonna sum this up because I'd like to see if there's any questions that I can answer. So in summary, you got to think about what you need: land, water, seeds, a market, but really, most of all, you need passion. You need to want to do this. You can't believe how many people, I'm the market manager for the Bismarck Farmers Market. And so people are always sending people to me because they're like, I want to be in the market. I want to be in the market. I'm like, fine. The first thing you need to do is fill out an application. Are you growing vegetables? Oh, yeah, we plan on growing all these great vegetables. You know how long that lasts? Maybe not even one season. I met a gal when I was doing newspaper stories. She lived in close to Elgin, I think, area. This was in like 2002 or so. And she had started a CSA, and my boss, Ken Rogers from the Bismarck Tribune, had bought a share in this woman's CSA, and he's like, let's do a story on this. I'd never heard of a CSA before, Community Supported Ag. Every week you receive a box after paying, $400, $600, $700, $800, and you just share in the harvest, but you also share in the, like if you get hailed out, supposedly you're helping that farmer by keeping them in business, but you're also sharing the losses as well as the bounty. So I go to this farm, and it's hotter than Hades that day, and it's like a dust bowl down there, and I'm like, how's this going for you? She's like, well, the water is over here, the garden is over here, nothing's growing. And I'm like, let me get this straight. You collect all this money from these people and you're not even watering your garden? You have to follow through on this. The people I started helped Jackie Buckley start the community garden in Mandan. And we have these beautiful gardens at the soccer fields. And you get all these people, and they're like coming up from down south. And they're like, oh, it's really nice in March. Can you till up the garden? We want to plant our garden. We're like, no, this is North Dakota. I'm just going to say this once. You better wait a while. And, they get frosted out. And then they can't buy plants to replace it. Or I've seen people show up at the community garden, and they're getting off work, and they run out and they turn the water on, and they go like this over their garden, and they're like there 10 minutes, and then they walk away and leave, and it's just impossible. Like you can't do that. You can't water like that. Plus then you got to come back once in a while and weed, or you got to come back and harvest your vegetables. So I get these people, and they're all excited to be in the farmer's market. And it lasts a couple months, and then they give up, because farming looks easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles away from a cornfield. I thought that was really a super good quote that kind of explains how this works. And really, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I revealed more about how I do my operation to you guys than I ever have to anybody. I don't like people to see me until after I take a shower at night. But oh, whatever. We've had such a beautiful, beautiful, bountiful garden this year. It's just been amazing. And I love it out there, as you can probably tell, and I have to fight with my husband every day about whether or not I should retire. And I'm like, this is my retirement. So hopefully I will be around to do this for a few more years. I think I have 2 more years left on my high tunnel contract if I'm going to grow for 5 years like I promised them. But do you have, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I haven't done this in a long time. I was a little nervous about this, which would explain why I couldn't find my way out here. And I almost got hit by a semi who was passing another car as I was going to turn to get out here. And I'm like, only by the grace of God I'm standing before you today. So I appreciate that too. But do you have any questions for me? Any burning questions? I guess not. I have some books here that I would highly recommend. Charles Dowding is an English gardener who is really good at taking the world's worst soil and turning it into a garden. So this is a good book. The Northlands Winter Greenhouse Manual. When I started working at the Ag Department, one of the first couples I met was Chuck Wabel and Carol Ford from Garden Goddess Produce. Chuck has since passed away, but they grew they grow vegetables, lettuce and kale all winter long in this greenhouse. And this has the unique way they built this with using heat from composting or propane, like $75 a winter. And they live in Minnesota. And this has become like a huge project with the University of Minnesota. So this is an original book that I bought. Farms actually helped them print another couple thousand, and it's actually in its 3rd printing. So if you want to build a really cool greenhouse, and then of course everybody knows who Elliot Coleman is, right? Elliot Coleman lives in Maine, which is on the same 100th meridian. I don't know which row goes which way. Latitude? And so if he can grow all winter long, we can grow all winter long. These are great books, great resources. You know you cannot have my tomatoes. That's it. Thank you very much.